Hello again, YouTube. This is Dave the Mechanic. Today I'm working on a 2007 Lexus LS 460. Alright, here's our example of the old part right next to the new part. Alright, same thing going in. We're going to plug that harness in first. Then we're going to get the starter set in and we'll go from there. Alright, we have the harness plugged in. We have the starter sitting where it should be. We're going to take our hot wire now and bring it back to the front and sit it back on top where it belongs, and we're going to put our nut right back at the end of that, and then we're going to put our two bolts back in. We have the starter back up and fully connected. The harness is connected and the hot wire is connected. The two bolts are back in and tight. Everything is ready to go. So now we can go ahead and put our catalytic converter back up and get it ready to put the bolts back on and the nuts back on. You want to make sure your gaskets didn't come off at the end, and you want to make sure up front is clean, and you want to make sure that the gaskets are still on in between the body and the pipes. All right, you want to make sure that this metal gasket between the body and the headers is in place. You can also check it to make sure it's in good condition. This one is in good condition still. And make sure that the maintenance surfaces on this end is clean. And make sure your gaskets are still down on this end. And if everything is good to go, we'll start putting it back up. Alright, I was able to lift this engine a little bit to get the clearance I needed to get the whole manifold off, and I was able to connect the catalytic converter in. So I just had to put the nuts on the manifold end now, and also I'm going to put this O2 sensor back in. Since it's still plugged in, I'm going to twist it to the right a bunch of times, like pre-twist it, because I know I'm going to have to twist it back in. And once I get it twisted enough, I'll set it in there and start to screw it in. And that will account for the fact that it's still plugged in. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and use my wrench to tighten that all the way. Alright, we have everything bolted nice and firm. All the nuts are on. So our catalytic converter is back on. Now we can go ahead and put our cover on. If you have a cover to put on, you can go ahead and put the cover on. Don't forget the bolts on the other side behind the alternator. And once the cover is on, we can go ahead and start putting our motor mount back on. I have my motor mount back in. So how I got mine in, I put the bottom in first. I put this on loosely first, so that way I can move it around. And of course you want to have your engine raised up. You know, the more raised it is, the more room you have to move these pieces around. Then I put my top part on. Then put my nut on the top. Then of course I put all my bolts in, and that basically was it for the motor mount. And then I put the dipstick tube back in, put my 10mm bolt in, and now we can go to the next step. I just have to go ahead and tighten up this bolt now that I'm finished. This is the final step for me. Once everything's tightened up on your motor mount, we can go ahead and get this piece back up here. Remember, it's 4 bolts. You have this one here, this is like a set, and then you have these 2. All right, it's time to get our sway bar back up. You have your bolts ready. You should have 2 for each side. And remember, we're just gonna hook it back to the sway bar link, and then we're gonna get our bolts in right here. All right, we're gonna put this bottom plate on. This is the one that's more forward. There's 8 small bolts that hold this in. I only had to take out 6 on this one, but I'm seeing 8 holes. And this is where it goes here. This is the front. You're gonna put those 4 small bolts in for the front, and then for the back, these 2 definitely, and one of these holes is going to be for this plate, and the other hole is going to be for the rear plate. Once your front bottom cover is on, we can go ahead and put our back bottom cover. Remember, it hooks in right here first. Then you can get these 2 bolts on this side, and then the 2 on that end, and then you finish off with the bolt that goes through here, and one on that side as well. All right, we have all of our underneath covers on. So since we're down here, I'm gonna go ahead and plug up back our drain. That way, once we get up top and finish putting in the alternator and all the hoses, we'll just be able to pour our coolant in without worrying about this drain. So let's go ahead and plug that up right now. All right, we're back up top. The first step here, we're gonna have to get our alternator back in. So I have it set up. I have my bottom bolts already in the alternator itself, because they're too long to try to put in once the alternator is in. So you have to put them in while you install. The trick, of course, is to slip the top sleeves onto the 2 studs that's up there. That's going to help line it up. Then once you get the bottom in and you get the bottom bolt started, then you can go ahead and put the 2 nuts that goes on top and tighten those and tighten the bottom bolts, and that will stabilize the alternator, and we'll go from there. One more thing, before we put the alternator on, actually, we're gonna plug it in, because it's gonna be harder to plug this in once you get it way back there. So we're gonna plug that in, as well as leaving the 2 bolts at the bottom before we install it. Keep in mind, if you want to do the bottom bolts easier on the alternator, you can do it from underneath, which is kind of why I still have the car raised up and the tire off. The tire is going to be the last thing I put on, so you can get these 2 bottom bolts a whole lot easier from down here. All right, so we have all 4 of our 14mm studs and bolts torqued down. So now we can go ahead and connect our hot wire on top back to our alternator. So of course, we're just going to take this part with the hole and place it over the stud that comes out of the back of the alternator, and then we're going to take our nut and put back on top of that stud. All right, now that I have the hot wire secured in the back of that alternator, I can secure my dipstick. So right here, because it's hard to get that bolt on the back of the alternator with this dipstick in place, so you have to have it loose. So now we can go ahead and secure that. All right, on the side of this alternator, there is a little wire. We can go ahead and snap that back. There's a little stud coming out of the alternator. You snap that on the side of that to keep it from getting in the place of the belt or anything else. Now remember our ground wire that goes right here. We can go ahead and put that back in place now. Get our bolt and put that in. Okay, I'm gonna show you the easiest way for me to get this belt on. So of course you have to leave slack somewhere, so I chose to leave the slack over here on this giant idle pulley. So that's why I decided to leave the slack. I have the belt hanging off here. I have the belt connected to everything else. See, it goes underneath the AC compressor. It goes on top of this idler here, and it goes up around, and I'm guessing this is the water pump here that goes over. Then it goes around underneath the alternator, back over the tensioner, back underneath the crank, and over this idler here. So I let the slack off of the idler because there's no lip for me to get over, so I can just slip it over once I'm able to move this tensioner back. So I'm gonna go ahead now and release the tension from here and then slip this belt over on this pulley. Okay, the belt is on. We're gonna go ahead and reconnect our lower radiator hose. I'm gonna go get that hose clamp on now. The last part I'm going to show me putting in is this intake part here, because everything else is pretty much simple and self-explanatory. So you want to get your my next step was to reinstall this reservoir. Real simple. It was a 10mm bolt here, 10mm bolt here. Reattach this hose. I brought this hose clamp back down because I removed that earlier to get this one off, and then reattach this hose here. And then the last part I'm going to show you me putting on is this part of the intake here, because everything else is just pretty much covers and simple things. You can just put those back on in reverse. Same thing with this. So this one, I think I all right, so with this one here, you want this side up. You want to get this part on all the way till this snaps in. Same thing on this end. Let that snap in. Then you have your two 10mm bolts that you have to put through here and here. You get those tightened down. Then you can start putting on all your covers, your clips and everything. Don't forget to put your negative terminal back on your battery. And that was a long process, but that's pretty much the last steps on this huge job. So once again, this is Dave the Mechanic. Thanks again for watching another video with me. This was a 2007 Lexus LS 460, and today we changed the starter. If you liked the video, you thought it was helpful, be sure to hit the like, subscribe button. Also, if you feel this video saved you some money, don't be afraid to leave a little tip in the Cash App. The more reactions and support that I receive is the more content that I'll make.